Have you ever felt like things were going really well for you? Maybe you were making headway on a big project, maybe you even had some cash saved up, and then your only car, which seems like it can smell money, said, okay, but what if you didn't have any time or cash? The problem is, I already committed to a project that would leave me with zero free time or money, and that's a 20,000 pound half-rotten wooden sailboat. So, sorry Rav, but I need to make you reliable. And so over the last month, that's what I've been doing, replacing the front and rear subframes, wheel bearings, the fuel system, the entire rear suspension, and a load of other parts. This would not have been possible without the help of my friend Chad. He helped me pick up the parts car that I harvested a bunch of parts off of, let me use his shop and tools, gave me advice when I was stuck, and did a bunch of rust repair that I don't currently have the skill set to pull off. I need to learn how to weld. And so we begin on Christmas Eve with trying to replace the front subframe assembly, the first big step in getting the car back in working order. December 24th, 2025, Christmas Eve. Time to get this car fixed so that I can get back to the boat. Still waiting on the rear subframe to come from the States, so I decided to tackle the front first. Sway bar bushings and lower engine mounts were both seized from rust, so we had to cut them off. I'm sure this is going to be a theme.
There we go. Oh, nice.
One of the subframe mounting points was completely sheared off from rust.
Oh, it's been patched once before too, by the looks of it.
I'm glad the parts car we picked up just had the subframe replaced so I could put it on my Rav. I was able to harvest a ton of great parts from the donor car, and I'm sure it will continue to come in handy. Are you kidding me? socket just fell down this hole. Oh my God. Yeah. Nice. Nice. Once I had the old subframe out, I cleaned the replacement parts up in the sandblaster and then gave everything a good spray of undercoating. Then I started putting everything back together, being sure to use anti-seize. I don't ever want to deal with rusty bolts again on this car, and I intend to keep it for a long time, if these repairs go well. Shockingly, I was able to get the front subframe finished in one day and drove the car home for the night. Morale is high. So far. December 27th. Started the day with an oil change. I had put a cheap oil and filter combo in 1,000 kilometers ago, as well as some seafoam in the crankcase 500 kilometers ago to try to flush out some of the old sludge. It looks like it may have worked well considering how dark the oil is. I've replaced it with a good quality synthetic oil and filter. Later, Chad lifted the back of the car up with the tractor, and we set it on blocks to prepare to take the trailing arms, which are in much better shape than mine. We also lifted the motor so that I could remove the belt tensioner to replace the one I put on only a few months ago. It's making an awful rattling noise that makes my car sound like a diesel when I put it in gear. So hopefully this will fix it. December 29th. The rear subframe arrived today from Florida. It looks almost brand new, but it's used. I'm jealous of people with access to Southern cars. Changed out the tensioner today. Fun fact, in order to remove the tensioner on a 2002 RAV4, you need to remove 2 engine mounts and lift the engine up nearly 6 inches.
Why did I do this so tight?
All of that just because one bolt will hit the chassis when you try to back it out. Once I had everything back together and the serpentine belt was routed properly, I started it up, and now my car doesn't sound like a diesel. Still has a bit of an exhaust leak though, but I have what I need to fix that. Unfortunately, the exhaust was not the only thing leaking. When I got back from a test drive and a fuel stop, I discovered that a small pinhole had opened up in the gas tank. I drained some of the gas, cleaned the area as best I could, and stuck some JB Weld high heat over the hole. It says it's fuel resistant, so hopefully it'll hold until I can afford a new tank. I also swapped out the battery from the parts car, which didn't require a piece of firewood to keep it in place. Later, after making a shanty roof out of lumber wrap to shelter the tools from the rain, I started trying to pull the trailing arms off the parts rav. Okay, that was too easy. Yeah, it's like a brand new wheel hub. Oh, come on. Oh my God. All right, screw it. Unfortunately, rust has fused the trailing arm to the mounting point on the car, so I'll have to continue this fight tomorrow.
Whatever it is, it's got a washer on it that's not coming off.
All right, I'm gonna call it for the night.
Yeah, that's gonna take a bit of... So that's all work.
December 31st. Awful weather yesterday, so I ended up staying home. Started on the other side's trailing arm since it was already ripped out of its mount before I bought it. Other than a stubborn axle nut, it came off easily.
Got it.
While I was doing the trailing arm, Chad cut out a good section of the rocker panel to transplant onto mine where it's rotten. Plasma cutters are neat. Once both arms were out, I spent the rest of the day cleaning up broken and seized bolts on one of them. January 1st, 2026. A new year. I spent the day finishing preparing the trailing arms, removing the rusted bolts with an induction heater and brute force, and a grinder when even that wasn't enough. I'm trying to save at least 2 of the old cam adjusters to reuse.
That sucks.
Once the old bushings were pressed out, I went over the arms with a needle scaler to remove excess rust, and then took them outside to sandblast them. Once they were cleaned up and dry, I painted them with black linseed paint. I've been using this paint for years on wooden surfaces, but apparently it also works great on metal. It'll be interesting to come back to them in a year or so to see how it's holding up. January 2nd. Spent most of the day running errands in town. When I got back, I got all the parts ready and then tried to get as much snow off the car as I could before leaving it in the shop overnight to thaw out. Before I left, I did a bit of disassembly and then pushed as much of the snow melt out of the door as I could. Hopefully it'll be dry in the morning. January 3rd. The floor was actually pretty dry when I got there this morning. It's always nice not to have to lay in a puddle of dirty water when you're working under a car. I honestly don't know how mechanics do this all day in the winter. Spent the day pulling apart the entire rear suspension, relying heavily on heat and the grinder. I hate rust. Yeah. Ouch. While we were trying to get the driver's side trailing arm out, the mounting point ripped off the car where it was weakened by rust. I don't want to work on this car anymore. Normally, this is where I would be considering giving up, but Chad is confident he can fabricate a new mount. Guess I didn't have to drain the fluid. Once I had the old subframe out, I swapped the rear differential onto the new one and then sprayed everything with undercoating, including the area above the differential and inside the main frame of the car. Then we lifted it into place and I bolted it back together before heading home for the night.
I'm gonna push it towards you a little bit.
Oh yeah, I'm up against the tailpipes. You're gonna have to go up. Gotta find a home.
January 4th. While Chad was working on fabricating the rocker panel and trailing arm mount repairs, I finished bolting up what I could without getting in his way, and then assisted where I thought I could be helpful. January 5th. Chad was still working on the rockers, so I thought I would tackle a side project until he was done and I could start putting in the suspension. For a while, I've had an exhaust leak at the manifold, as well as a catalytic converter engine code, so I decided to replace it. Fun fact, the 2002 RAV4 has 2 catalytic converters, and they're integrated into the exhaust manifold. Toyota wants $2,000 just for the cat. I did not buy it from Toyota.
You leave your hand by the exhaust port there? There. There's nothing in here.
There's no cat? January 6th. Finally, the fun part, reassembling the suspension. I started on the passenger side while Chad finished up rebuilding the trailing arm mount on the other side. Everything went well, and I was sure to use copious amounts of anti-seize on the cam adjusters. I did get 2 new cam bolts thinking they would only fit the control arms, but it turns out that they also fit the trailing arms. I'm going to order another pair and install them in the future since they're greasable. But at that point, I'll have to do another alignment. I also cleaned up and painted a few pieces of hardware, as well as the drum brakes.
This might be the part where I figure out that you have to install the CV axle before you connect the control arms. No, okay, we're good.
Once Chad finished up, I put a rough coat of body filler on the rocker and assembled the other side. January 7th. Time to button everything up before the alignment tomorrow. I forgot to install the rubber insulators on the trailing arms, so I threw those on. Installed the sway bar link I forgot on the driver's side. And then gave everything a good spray of undercoating.
.3 in the top.
Once the wheels were on, we did a quick camber adjustment, and then I tightened all the suspension bolts with the weight of the car on the wheels.
Okay, about 0 right there. Okay.
That's good there?
Yeah.
Cool. I also replaced the sagging weather stripping and did a bit of rust cleanup in the door sill. Once I got back from the test drive, I had time to do one last thing that's been bothering me for a while, the hard start issue. I took the fuel rail and injectors off the parts car, cleaned them with carb cleaner, and put them in mine. It's worth noting that the injectors off the parts car are for a slightly larger 2.4 liter engine, and likely have a larger flow rate. But the fuel trim doesn't seem to be affected. January 8th. The alignment went great. The steering wheel is no longer at a 10-degree angle while I'm driving down the road. I don't have any check engine lights, and I have a reliable little car that absolutely rocks in the snow. Now, time to get back to the boat. I need to give a huge thank you to Chad. Without him, his shop, his tools, his help, this wouldn't have been possible. The other reason I was able to do this was because of viewers like you. I wouldn't have been able to take all this time off work to fix this car if you weren't watching this, supporting the videos through Patreon or otherwise. A year or two ago, this would have resulted in me buying another used car, hoping it wasn't a lemon, and going into even more debt, which I've already done multiple times. So, thank you for making this possible and keeping me on the road. You're next.